Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday. I'm so excited for our episode today. We talk about one of my favorite subjects, and it used to not be a favorite subject of mine at all. I actually found it quite boring until I took Montessori training. We're talking all about geometry and how it's done in the Montessori classroom. We decided to talk about geometry for a few reasons. Number one reason is because the way geometry is done in the Montessori classroom is just absolutely amazing and unlike anything I've really ever seen before. And the other really big reason we wanted to talk about it is because geometry is really adaptable with virtual learning and for homeschool learning. Geometry is everywhere. All you really need is a ruler, a yardstick, pencil, some graph paper. You can do a lot with it. So it's really doable at home. And when we talk through all of that, I wanted to say a few things before we get going. I don't know if you know, but we have a Patreon now. So you can go over to patreon.com and you can become a patron of us today if you want. It's pretty cool. So Patreon is just a way for listeners of podcasts or supporters of artists can support the art that they love with getting something back. So that could be extra content. It could be a consulting session, any of those sorts of things. And it's a great thing. So go ahead and check that out. And if you haven't yet, go ahead and check out our website, allthingsmontessoripodcast.com. Yep. And as always, shoot us an email or DM us on Instagram if you have any questions. We're really ramping up for the school year, and I want us all to be in this together. It is uncharted territory, and we're gonna get through it together, whether you're going back into the classroom, whether you're homeschooling, whether you're an administrator, or if you're doing virtual learning. We're all over the place. So we all need to support each other, and All Things Montessori, Jamie and I, we are really here for you all. So as always, thanks for listening and enjoy this episode all about geometry. Hey, Jamie. How's it going?
Pretty good. How's it going for you?
It's going great. Let's see. I feel like we always talk about the weather, so I'm not going to talk about the weather. I'm great. Drinking coffee. Mm-hmm. My dog is fully healed. I was listening to an old episode the other day, and I was talking about when he was all hurt and everything, and he's fine now. He just has he has a double ear infection.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Apparently dogs that get into water constantly get ear. It's like swimmer's ear,
Got it.
Like the same thing.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
that's what's going on here. What's going on in your world?
We're all healthy in our world, and we're getting a little space because the girls are house sitting for some friends. So it's like our staycation this summer with a little bit of space after all these months together all the time. So that's been a nice change of pace.
Yeah. I know. I mean, I'm sure it's been good for the girls too, to get a little independence,
Yeah, to not just have us around, because we are like literally around all the time, more than we normally are. So,
it's funny. I was thinking the other day, I was just like, this is so normal now.
I know.
It's so normal that I don't go anywhere, that all I really do is see my husband and my dog.
I know.
And that's just what happened. It's weird.
We're all going to have serious sort of issues going back to our normal, busy, highly interactive lives, because it's been so long now. Because what has it been, almost 5 months?
Yeah. I know. I look at my calendar and it's just empty. I mean, I have social things. I have work and stuff on it, but it's social events. I don't even what are those? I don't even know.
Right. Yeah.
Right. What?
It's a whole, we've kind of settled into it. It's interesting, but
I know. And the whole mask wearing thing, that's just so normal now. That used to feel so weird, but now it's so normal.
Yeah. You just always have one with you, and you always plan, it's just, yep.
I bought, speaking of that, before we get into today's episode, I bought the cutest mask yesterday. It is a Harry Potter mask and it has snitch on it and it says Quidditch and it's so cute. Maybe I'll put a picture on our Instagram because it's the cutest mask ever. I got it at this farmer's market. This woman locally makes them and it's so cute.
That's so funny.
But yeah, I never thought I'd be saying a mask. I don't know, that just wouldn't have existed a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
Me,
You sharing your mask fashion with, I know.
That's right. I know. It's so weird. Anyway, aside from the weirdness, we're going to talk about a subject area in the Montessori elementary classroom that is so beautiful and just pretty wonderful. We're going to talk about geometry. Me personally, when I saw that geometry was, a section of my training, I just thought, oh my gosh, geometry is so boring. Because I just remember geometry from my own schooling, like in high school.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, me too. I felt the same way. I found geometry in high school to be super boring, really focused on like the textbook and proofs, having to prove this and prove that.
Yes.
And it didn't seem anything. It didn't seem alive at all. Just these boring books and writing out proofs. Mm-hmm.
I remember that too. I mean, I have vivid memories of just worksheets and a projector and just the shapes on paper.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't have any context to really what geometry was.
Right.
And one really cool thing that Montessori did for me in geometry is it made me see the world geometrically.
Yeah.
Because the world is just a big bunch of geometry, Yep.
Yep. I think that was especially for elementary children. Like Montessori realized, like, we're not like trying to systematically study geometry or push them through a systematic study, but we're preparing their minds. We're helping to prepare their minds for a systematic study later. And part of that is for them to be able to see the geometry in the world all around them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And geometry starts very young. I mean, geometry starts in the primary classroom. Not as, as detailed as we go into in the elementary, but, those children are using, what do you call that material? I can't remember. I know it's the different triangles. What is the name for it?
Oh, the detective adjective game?
That's not.
Or the geometry cabinet?
Yeah, I guess the geometry cabinet. And then just all the different triangles that they use. I mean, I guess it's like the triangular box. They have that in their classroom, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yep. They have constructive triangles there.
Yeah.
But listen to all the things I'm saying as I'm trying to guess what you're thinking of.
I know.
They because there's a lot of work with geometric shapes and solids in the primary, but it's they really focus on helping them have the language. So they're honing the eye to be able to visually discriminate between these different types of shapes, and then also know the names of these different shapes. So not just circle, square, triangle, but different kinds of triangles, right-angled isosceles triangle, or, they're going to learn all that language at a time when their minds can really absorb it. They're going to fold their napkins into different geometric shapes.
It's amazing.
They're going to, cut a carrot. If you cut it sort of straight on, you're going to get circles. If you cut it at an angle, you'll get an ellipse. Like all of those kinds of experiences to help the children just see the geometry all around them will happen in the primary environment. Yep.
Yeah. And I know it's one of the materials that I used to hear, teachers would sort of not complain, but, oh, they're doing it again, is the metal insets, which is, it's not really introduced until later in primary, I think, because they need the control of the hand. But basically it's introducing the concept of geometric design. And it's helping them, with that finger strength and holding the pencil. And I mean, some of those designs that those children make are downright stunning. They're beautiful.
Yep.
They're perfect. They're very, very precise.
Well, and that's really where they they develop this clear observation of like geometric shape, and they understand the details and the care that it takes. And as a result, it's that artistic piece that is helping to teach geometry. Montessori talks about that in her book, Psychogeometry. Psycho meaning the psychologically appropriate approach to geometry for the child's developmental stage. So not psycho like crazy,
right?
But psychogeometry meaning we're following the child's psychological development and doing geometry appropriate to their development. But she says in that book, that it is artistic creation that really becomes the teacher of geometry when the children get that opportunity to create with geometric shapes. So that work is really valuable work in the primary, but also in the elementary.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think the creativity that comes with the geometric work that the children do is what you were saying earlier about your experience, how geometry didn't, it wasn't alive. That's what makes it alive, I think, in the Montessori environment, because they're being so creative and manipulating shapes and making these designs. And what that's doing to their brain. I mean, this is what it did for me. I just began to see the similarities and, all the different ways that shapes, are all around us. And it helps with seeing similar shapes, with equivalent shapes. It helps with all of that. But to the 6-year-old, 7-year-old child, when they're working with the triangular box and the small hexagonal box and all of those, maybe they're just moving the shapes around. I had this child, oh my gosh, he loved that material so much.
It's
so much.
It's
and
amazing.
It is amazing. And I was just like, I can't believe he's still working with that, But the things he would do with it, the way he would manipulate the shapes and find new equivalencies and new similarities that I hadn't seen before, pretty fantastic. I swear he's going to be like an architect or something, probably, or some sort of engineer, because he was so fascinated by it.
Yeah. We show on the course a few things you can do with the constructive triangles to show the children, how to build some equivalent relationships, but it's just a little beginning. Like those are not the end all. And the children should be exploring with all of those, because then they really are getting such an extraordinary experience with equivalence and with, shape and space relationships. It's they can work on constructive triangles all day long. There's no end to what they can discover there. So especially when they mix all the boxes together.
Oh, I know. That's when it gets really fun.
Yep. And that exploration is really a key. So all the work we do in geometry really starts with some of that sort of hands-on exploration. And all of that should be happening it can happen at the same time. So we don't need to approach our geometry work in sort of thinking that there's a particular sequence, especially the early sensorial work. It can be happening kind of simultaneously. You could introduce polygons with the box of sticks, or you could introduce lines, or you could introduce angles, or you could do them all kind of parallel. Parallel lines.
Nice.
But you don't have to worry about a specific sequence, particularly at that introductory level with the children.
No, you really don't. And a lot of the intro is just further manipulation of the material, right? So it's just like, it's perfect for that younger child. And that's when I find that they're so interested, because they just, when they first enter the classroom or when they're in lower elementary, they just want to touch everything. And, manipulating that material, specifically the box of sticks, there is so much you can do with that one material. Oh my God. It might be one of my favorites, honestly. it was one of the materials that when I first started teaching, if I wanted to look busy, I would just get that out because I found it so fun. But the children do too. And, I just want to jump in here just really quickly about, how a lot of us aren't going to be in the classroom or things like that. There are a lot of ways that you can, that children can do the box of sticks or, use geometric shapes at home. You could do paper cutouts of things. They could get, you could maybe use like chopsticks or something. I feel like there's a lot of materials in the home that can be used to create shapes and find those equivalencies. More so than I think a lot of the math materials. I think geometry is a little bit easier to adapt at the home.
Totally.
And,
because it's such a part of our, a part of our real life. We can talk about lines and what the different parts of a line are, what a line is, but then we do, even in the classroom, have the children go and find lines around the classroom. There's lines everywhere. I'm looking at my bookshelf and I can see a line on the edge of the shelf there. I can see. So there's ample opportunity to really help aid children's vocabulary, even at home, even without the box of sticks, because a lot of what they need to further support their later work in a systematic study later in middle school and high school or whatever is that they need to have a lot of language about geometry. What is a line? Yeah. What is it? Geometry is all about sort of defining things. And elementary children love to do that. They love to debate and reason about definitions. I even remember once in an upper L class that I was at a school where I was working, I wandered in and I gathered a little group that didn't seem all that focused and started talking to them about, I think we were asking them to define different polygons or something. Anyway, it was, all these older children who, wrote definitions, and then I went to draw exactly what they'd written. And I said, and it would often maybe not be what they thought they had written, not what they thought they were defining. And so it really was, we just were, giggling uncontrollably at the drawings I made, but also really having fun honing their language and vocabulary to really, fully define whatever geometric concept. And that can be really fun work even for older children that already know what a line is and what a ray is or anything like that. But to really kind of solidify their knowledge as they're getting older and getting ready to leave the elementary environment. So there's no end to the sort of fun you can have in geometry with the materials or without the materials, to be honest.
I agree. And I do think that honing in of that vocabulary is super important because, the line lesson is very simplistic to a 10-year-old, but you probably gave that lesson to them 4 years ago. And it's really good to, one, you can go deeper with it, but just to, check in and make sure that they remember, what array is exactly, or a segment, or all of those sorts of things.
And then realistically, like for my daughter, when she took geometry in high school, a good chunk of the first quarter was all review of stuff she'd learned in Montessori, like the names of these things, the definitions, and then the area and volume work that they did, all from a textbook, but it was all a review of stuff she'd done in Montessori Elementary. So that's really valuable if they've had that, and the way we do area is not just from a textbook. The children get to manipulate, they manipulate, the yellow grid material, what we call it, area material, but you have a triangle that you can manipulate into a rectangle and then derive the formula for area of a triangle from seeing how it relates to a rectangle through that equivalence. And that's a powerful sort of understanding of area, far more powerful than mine was, which was
Mm-hmm.
1/2 base times height. I don't know why. It doesn't make any sense to
Right.
me,
It's just
but
what it is.
I
Right.
just memorized the formula, and now you can find the area of a triangle. And these children actually have true understanding of that relationship to the physical space. I think that was the most amazing thing to me, and realizing how much geometry connects to actual physical space that I didn't feel like was emphasized in my own school experience at all, since it was just
I
like
can,
shapes on a page.
right. Absolutely. Yeah. And oh my gosh, the area material, the yellow grid material, what we're talking about, that was a mind blowing thing for me too, because I was always just given formulas. And for somebody like me, I'm a very visual, hands on person. So that was just, it made zero sense to me. But I just was like, well, I guess I have to memorize this and I don't really know why. And then but, I think that's why a lot of children, as they get older, if they don't have this deep understanding of like, oh, okay, that's what it is because I've visually seen it and I know how it works. That's why you do ask well, why? Why do I do this? And frankly, a lot of times you don't get an answer.
Right.
You're like, well, it's just because it's what we're learning. It's like, okay. And I get it. Like that's not exactly an easy question to answer if you don't have the visual representation to aid you with that. But when, the children can manipulate that area material, we have a plate about Pythagorean theorem. When they can prove that theorem without even knowing what the actual formula is, that's a concrete understanding that, and it's like, I don't know. I think the more we can do visual learning, the more we can have experiences with concepts like that, the stronger your understanding is.
Totally.
And it's really fun.
I remember when they did Pythagoras, the plates on my course.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I have a memory of maybe doing it sort of in the middle of lecture, or maybe I did it at a break, but my mind was like blown by that. The idea that when we talk about a squared plus b squared equals c squared, it is literally squares, actual squares drawn off the legs of a right triangle. So those squares off those legs, physical squares, equal the square built on the hypotenuse of that same triangle. I never knew that it was actual squares that it built. I just memorized a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And that was one of those mind-blowing moments in my original training. But I think that's something that, of course, the children that we give this to, they just take it. I mean, this is just how we do it.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Right. Of course. They're like, this is great. I mean, I completely agree. I mean, just that I knew what an exponent was. I knew that it was a number 2, and I knew it was called, that meant it was going to be squared. Never would have thought it was an actual square.
Right.
Literally never. And then when I realized that, I was like, oh, what? This is so cool, But, there are moments like that all over the Montessori experience, right? There are moments like that all over it that are just, it is almost so painfully obvious, when you see that square. It's like, oh my God, that's so literal.
Yeah.
But, I never had that shown to me before. That is the genius of Montessori. I think she really thought through, okay, I'm going to break down these concepts that are really abstract and I'm going to show them visually. And I think that is it is magnificent because it really sticks with you and your brain, especially a young child. When you visually see something, it makes all the sense in the world. And then what's even cooler about geometry is they have this experience where they're working with the concrete materials. But then as they work with them, we're not giving them the formula. They discover the formula themselves as they're doing it.
Right.
And there's so much of that in the math materials as well, where like they discover it. So it's like they have ownership over it.
Yep. So we're going to
how cool is that?
Like they're going to get experience taking those pieces of those squares and manipulating them and seeing that they're equal to the other square, all of that. And then we're just going to help elicit from them the sort of rule that they're seeing and then the formula. And that is, that's super powerful. That's knowledge that they really and truly own, that they can really understand that, which is why our job in the geometry work with the children is to really be sure they get a lot of that experience with manipulation and with exploration with all these materials, and then that we help them discover the definitions themselves. We help them discover the formula themselves. Our goal is that emerges from their experience, not from us telling them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember as a teacher, when I was in the classroom feeling really I wanted to tell them because I wanted to make sure that they got it. And I'm sure I'm sure I maybe elicited a little bit too much, so they, because I was just nervous that they weren't going to get it. But it's really important to really just sort of step back, because as they continue working with it, they're going to get there. And it's so much cooler when they have that aha moment, that that beautiful elementary child, their eyes get really wide and they're like, oh, it's so fun.
Yep. It's so incredible. Fun. And before they do the area work, we have all this practice and exploration with equivalents that they get to do. So not just with the constructive triangles, but also with the Pythagoras plates, and also with other, the iron material, the other sort of metal plates that we have, where we've got trapezoids and parallelograms and pentagons and all sorts of different shapes that have been divided into pieces so that you can build equivalencies with rectangles and things to help get the children get their hands on how these shapes can be manipulated. And of course, all of our area formulas are derived from area of a rectangle, because that's so easy, base times height. So if we can convert any shape to a rectangle, we can then come up with a formula for it based on what parts of that original shape are making up the rectangle. But before we go anywhere close to that formula with the children, we just give them lots of experience making equivalent shapes. And that shouldn't be rushed and shouldn't be, just let the children do a ton of that, a ton of design work with that, a ton of tracing of these things and making beautiful pictures and other sorts of, any number of things with it that they can have this work with equivalence, because that lays the foundation for them being able to pretty quickly understand area at that point.
And I think, all this work with equivalence, congruence, similarity, I think that's really doable at home right now, for teachers who are kind of looking for those sorts of lessons that are going to translate well virtually. I think that's a great place to start, because it can add to follow-up work. They can make an equivalent shapes, notebook or something, or they can find all the equivalent shapes in their house, or they can measure to find all the shapes that are similar in their kitchen or things like that. I think it can keep them busy for a bit, which is good for parents and teachers right now,
Yep, totally.
And then for the older ones, you can have them finding the area or the perimeter of things in their home, too. You know, that's super easy.
Get a tape measure, yardstick, and have them measure. Yep. I mean, they love to do that in the classroom too. And so, of course, they'll do it at home. And depending on the age of the children, have them, have them find, I'm looking at the room I'm in right now, and you could find the area of the big, huge rectangle that exists, but then you'd need to subtract the area that's taken out by the closet and the stairway, and, add some complexity, not just if it's if there's these things that take out space, have them find the area of those and subtract, and then find the area of the usable space that they're in. I mean, you can do all sorts of more challenging exercises on area that can be really fun. And if you're doing any home repair or remodeling or recarpeting, it's a very useful thing to know.
That's right. That is so right. I also think volume, if you're there with some of your older children, that definitely is another thing that can be work at home, for sure. And I know the volume material that we have in the classroom is lovely and amazing, but they can find similar things at home and find the volume of those. And if you need your parents to get some sand or some things like that, I think
Flour.
that's pretty doable.
Flour.
Yeah, flour.
I mean, you can do a lot of volume with baking work too.
Yeah.
With measuring cups and different types. There's all sorts of types of measuring cups you can order now of different shapes. And there's some decent like plastic volume material that's pretty inexpensive if, you know.
Oh, yeah.
But ultimately for children, by the time they're to volume, you know, the materials become less of a material for exploration and more of a sort of ticket to the formula to a certain extent. Do you know what I mean? Like they're not going to explore it in quite the same way, but it is relating to their exploration of equivalence and area, and then just adding that other dimension to it. Aside from the beginning exercises with the cubes, that is more of a sensorial exploration where they're building out of cubes, which is totally possible to do at home if you have any cube-shaped blocks or the cube-shaped Legos. Children could explore it. You have to have it all be the exact, you know, it has to be a cube.
Same size, right.
The measure.
Exactly.
But I think those, there's some Legos that are pretty close to a cube shape, and you could use those as your unit of measure for volume and build shapes out of those. Yeah. There must be other toys, but I'm so distanced from
I know.
It. Oh, you could use sugar cubes.
Oh, yeah. Sugar cubes.
I'm just trying to think of household things you could do to have that sensorial exploration with volume, where they're going to build shapes, you know, geometric figure, you know, solids, and see, you know, you can find see the different things you can build with the same amount of cubes or that sort of thing. That does give a real sensorial experience, and you can really focus on those 3 dimensions that you're working with when you're looking to find volume. So that can be something you could do at home.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure I think other people are thinking of actual
I know. I'm like,
cubes.
I can literally only think of Legos right now. I don't know why. It's like all I have in my head. I'm like, Anyway, if you think of any cubes, please email us so we can know which ones to use. Thank you. Oh my gosh. Yeah, but you know, I think, you know, what we're saying is geometry is super fun in the Montessori classroom, and it's beautiful, and it really opens your eyes. I mean, even as I'm talking about geometry right now, I'm looking at my window and I'm just looking at all the geometric shapes I see outside. And that's what happens with the children when you open their eyes to this amazing. And there's so many geometric shapes in nature. Oh my God. Yeah. It is full of geometry. Yeah. And that's something they can explore too, right? Like you can encourage them to go outside. Yes, art and music.
Yep. So I think all of that can be a place to really focus both in the classroom and outside of the classroom. And I was thinking too, another thing to have at home are different tangram puzzles. Those can be great if people have those for working with equivalents and shapes like this and really honing that. So no end to kind of how you can bring this alive at home, you know, in a similar way that we do in the classroom, but you don't have to necessarily have an entire Montessori geometry material set to do that.
No, you really don't at all. You know, I mean, Montessori, I think I'm biased because I'm a Montessorian, but I think it's really doable in the home. I think it's not ideal because what we want is the children and the community in the Montessori environment, of course, but I do think it is adaptable to the home environment right now.
Yep. Totally.
You know, and you got to think a little bit outside of the box, you know, and see what'll work, but you don't need all the materials as beautiful and amazing as they are. We can get by with not having them for the rest of pandemic 2020 COVID whatever,
right?
Whatever it is,
until they can get back in the classroom. I think we can totally still explore a lot of these ideas, and it does really lay the groundwork for children's future work in geometry
Mhm.
without having to sort of systematically like drill them on these things right now. We just
Right.
allow them to
Right.
explore. We offer them the bits of information they need, the names, the definitions. We help them really own those and discover them and come to them through their own experience, and that really sticks with them. I've seen that with my own children, but I've also heard it from past students how useful it was to have that experience throughout geometry.
Mm.
So,
How cool.
yeah.
Yeah. I love that. That's so awesome. Well, we hope this inspired you to do some geometry. And yeah, hang in there, everybody. Maybe read your geometry album to like
Yeah.
feel fun and inspired.
Or even better, probably read Montessori's book, Psychogeometry. It came out maybe, I guess, probably 10 years ago now. But when it came out, it was pretty life altering for me. A lot of what she wrote, because there's not just stuff about geometry in there, but a lot of really practical things about how we work with children to get them to really engage in work generally. And it's a really useful read. And there's gorgeous illustrations of work with materials, and it's not the kind you have to read straight through. I mean, you can pick up and do little bits at a time.
Right.
So
right. Awesome. I actually haven't read it. It's on my bookshelf. I guess I'm going to read it now. I'm inspired.
You should. Yeah, it's a great book.
Awesome.
All right. Have fun with geometry.